Northern Ireland, 6 or 7 degrees here because the cloud is arriving. And that cloud brings some rainfall, mainly during Saturday morning, northern and western Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. A damp start to the day, some heavier bursts coming along by the afternoon for the west coast of Scotland and for the higher ground. But for much of England and Wales, when it stays dry, there'll be some decent spells of sunshine and it's warmer, especially in the east where temperatures could rise to 17 or 18 degrees. Now the rain in the north tends to stumble further south into Saturday evening, reaching North Wales, parts of northern England. It breaks up, it's largely light and patchy, so not particularly helpful for gardeners, I suspect. And then showers to start next week, turning drier later.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing, your afternoon fix of all the latest political news, debate and analysis. I'm Arlene Foster and here's what's coming up over the next hour. All week, Westminster has been rattled by allegations of misconduct and harassment. What does that say about the culture in our Parliament? Rishi Sunak refuses to rule out a windfall tax on gas companies as profits hit record levels during the cost of living crisis. And a Russian energy giant has halted gas exports to Poland and Bulgaria amid the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. We'll speak to a Polish journalist about European reliance on Russian energy and what should be done to tackle it. Our Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie has been speaking to voters in a crunch battleground Belfast seat ahead of next week's Assembly elections. And Jacob Rees-Mogg announces a U-turn on post-Brexit checks on imports. We'll speak to the former President of the Board of Trade, Lord Lilly, about that. So, as always, I want to hear what you think. Give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. But first, here's your news with Rhiannon.
Thank you, Arlene. It's 1 minute past 3. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. 2 British charity workers reportedly captured by the Russian military in Ukraine have been named as Paul Urey and Dylan Healy. It's understood the volunteers were detained earlier this week at a checkpoint close to Zaporizhia in the south. The 2 men, both civilians, were working as part of a joint humanitarian project helping evacuation efforts. The reports haven't yet been independently verified. The UK is sending experts to Ukraine to help investigate any potential Russian war crimes. The Foreign Secretary's announcement follows the death of a British military veteran in Ukraine this week. Liz Truss says a team of investigators will arrive in neighbouring Poland early next month with the aim to help prosecute Moscow. Following talks at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, Ms Truss said it's vital those who commit war crimes are held to account.
We want to see justice done for the people of Ukraine. We've seen appalling war crimes committed, the use of rape and sexual violence. We will be sending in a British evidence collecting team, working with the Ukrainian authorities, working with the ICC. We've been talking today about the urgency of making sure justice is done, and that also we call out rape as a use of weapon in war.
A special operation will take place today to try and evacuate civilians from the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol. The decision was announced by the Ukrainian president's office. Hundreds of civilians are said to be sheltering in bunkers underneath the plant, which has been sealed off by Russian forces. It's thought around 500 wounded Ukrainian fighters are in there, some in a serious condition. Back here, MPs will now be offered individual security advice tailored to the specific threats they face. It's after a review was launched following the murder of Sir David Amess last year. He was the second MP to be killed in less than 6 years. Labour MP Joe Cox was murdered in 2016. Threats will be handled by a new multi-agency team, including the police, the Home Office and other government security experts. The Labour Party has now confirmed that its deputy leader was with Sir Keir Starmer at a gathering in Durham during lockdown. Previously, journalists had been told Angela Rayner wasn't at the event in which Sir Keir was filmed drinking beer. Now a source insists that was a mistake made in good faith. Tory MPs have asked police to reconsider their decision not to investigate the event. The man accused of murdering Katie Kenyon will stand trial on the 14th of November. Mother of two, 33-year-old, was last seen getting into a van in Burnley in Lancashire last Friday. 50-year-old Andrew Burfield from Burnley has been charged with her murder. He appeared via video link from HMP Preston for a brief court hearing this morning. Preston Crown Court was told the body of the alleged murder victim has yet to be recovered. The government is stepping up efforts to tackle supply shortages affecting hormone replacement therapy. Health Secretary Sajid Javid has appointed Madeleine McTurnan to lead a new HRT task force. The Department for Health and Social Care says she'll use her knowledge from the coronavirus vaccine rollout to help address the shortages. The three-time Wimbledon champion Boris Becker is at Southwark Crown Court for sentencing after being found guilty of flouting the terms of his 2017 bankruptcy. The former world #1 tennis player was accused of transferring hundreds of thousands of pounds from his business account and failing to declare a property in his hometown of Lyman in Germany. Becker was also convicted of hiding an €825,000 bank loan. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to the briefing with Arlene.
Welcome back to the briefing. Well, it hasn't been a good week for women in Parliament. This week started with sexist remarks made towards the Deputy Labour leader, Angela Rayner, as reported in the Mail on Sunday. 56 MPs are reportedly under investigation for sexual harassment, and a Conservative MP has been accused of watching porn in the Commons chamber. The main question is, what is going on in Parliament? This was the answer given from Anne-Marie Trevelyan, the International Trade Secretary, when asked this morning on our breakfast show if she had experienced misogyny in Parliament herself.
Yes, a number of times. I'm fairly well known for calling it out. I'm happy to call out poor behaviour by any man publicly, so they've pretty much learnt to not do it around me, but that is not okay. It is never okay for what is a very small minority, thank goodness, of men and, without political choice across the House who think that it's okay to be abusive or to be, sexually predatorial in any way, or indeed demonstrating any kind of bullying towards those who work with or for them. This is an environment, so it's a difficult and a strange work environment that we are in Parliament. We work very long hours under very stressful conditions. For many, when you have very difficult constituency cases, it's an environment where support and care and nurturing of those who are coming through, who are taking on this important role, we should all be supporting each other. And for the vast majority, that is the case. But for those who are getting it wrong, who think it's okay, or indeed who are not considering the care of their colleagues and those who work with and for us, need to do so. And I'm very pleased that we are definitely making progress on empowering those who are at the sharp end of this misogyny to stand up and speak out, and that the House is standing alongside them, and that we are going to root this out. It is never okay, and anyone who thinks that bullying or sexual predatory behaviour of any sort is okay needs to know that we are not going to allow this to continue.
Well, that was Anne-Marie Trevelyan earlier on this morning. And joining me now to talk about all of this is Caroline Fisk. Caroline is the founder of Conservatives for Women and also a former Conservative councillor in Hammersmith and Fulham. So thank you for joining me, Caroline. Goodness, what a week. There seems to have been a lot going on in Parliament. What did you make of it all this week?
I guess what I've wanted to be clear about and what I've been concerned about is when we have got very specific incidences of very bad behaviour, very poor behaviour, particularly I'd like to discuss the porn, but we tend to broaden it out into moral panics, which tend to create entire classes of victims and then entire classes of aggressors. And I think it's bad for women to be always sort of categorised as the victim, and it's bad for men, who the vast majority are on our side. So I think we should focus on the very, very bad incidents and absolutely root them out.
And I think Anne-Marie Trevelyan was reflecting on that, because she said it was a very, very small number of people. And indeed, the Attorney-General, Suella Braverman, said exactly the same thing. Look, this is a very small number of people, but they're creating a toxic atmosphere. So let's deal with it. How do we deal with it?
I think, again, by not sort of always broadening it out, but actually naming the issues, being willing to talk about morality in public rather than always seeing these things through the lens of identity politics. It's always misogyny, it's always sexism. But let's be more specific and name problems. And then those problems, those issues, those behaviours are utterly unacceptable and should be called out.
So for you, it would be not misogyny as such, it's more about power, is that right? About the abuse of power?
OK, I would say name the specific problem. So whether it's the bullying, whether it's appalling behaviour, which another MP mentioned about being pushed up against a wall. It's the watching of porn anywhere in public. Let's name these problems and deal with them. My concern about always broadening it out, if I could just read something out to you. Now, this is from Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary. He said that MPs should avoid Parliament bars and go home instead to reduce the poisonous culture of inappropriate and sexist behaviour. Now, if you broaden that out outside Parliament, should all of us, grown adults, grown men and women, go home? Absolutely not. We need to be out and socialising, having fun, drinking, engaging in robust conversations. Sometimes, a little bit of innuendo, but don't take all of that and say it's wrong. Focus instead on the real problems and the specific bad behaviour and say it's unacceptable.
It was interesting, Anne-Marie Trevelyan was asked about that actually this morning, about should we close the bars in Westminster to deal with this issue, and she said no. Why should we close the bars? It's quite appropriate for us to go and have a glass of wine after we've had a really tough day, discuss issues with colleagues and then go home. It's the abuse of alcohol, I think, is the problem. And therefore, there's a need to be reasonable when we talk about these issues. Is that not the case?
Well, again, I just have noticed we've lately always had this thing of broadening out problems and naming entire classes of victims and then entire classes of aggressors or so-called aggressors. So I've been interested at Sadiq Khan. We've got these terrible problems in the Metropolitan Police, accused of serious misogyny. We've had appalling murders and rapes. One of the responses has been to put notices in the tube calling out staring.
Yeah.
And it's just a diversion of resources. An enormous amount of resources would have gone into those posters and the campaign. Meanwhile, we have women, vulnerable women in really serious situations, and we need to be focusing on that.
Yeah.
So focusing on the bad behaviour, not always broadening it out.
And I saw the cartoon in the Evening Standard yesterday, and it was this. It was a lady looking at Parliament, and there was a sign up saying "Enter at your peril." And I mean, this is what you're talking about, isn't it? That we can put people off actually stepping forward and becoming parliamentarians if they think there's a risk that they're going to be subjected to inappropriate behaviour or indeed action as well.
So I'd like to say that Suella Braverman, she was in the papers yesterday saying that she's been nearly 20 years in politics and she's always been treated, with absolute dignity and respect.
Yeah.
So that is the important narrative, that women must be in politics and will be treated well in politics, and that bad behaviour will be called out.
Yeah, no, I think that is very important, because what we want to see, those of us who have been involved in politics, and you've been involved in politics, I've been involved in politics, it's so important to encourage young women to step forward and to get involved in politics, and we don't want to put them off. And I've talked about social media and how that has a cooling impact on women stepping forward. Well, we don't want this to discourage people as well.
No, listen, 100% put yourself forward and you will be treated well. And if there's bad behaviour, call it out.
Yeah.
Name it and call it out. But let's not have this broader moral panic which will put people off, put women off entering politics.
I suppose, Caroline, and I mean, you and I have talked about this earlier, it's important that people do call out bad behaviour and inappropriate conversations. But is it not the case that we need a process to be able to do that? And do you think that the processes are there in Parliament to do that in an appropriate way? Because some people may be afraid if they speak out against someone who's quite powerful that there'll be ramifications for that.
To be honest, you would know more about that than me, the absolute specifics. But listen, I believe the processes are in place. But sometimes, look, if we need to go around the processes, I understand this MP who's been watching porn, or nobody seems to be saying that didn't happen.
Yes.
Now, if I'd seen in the papers that, he is denying it, well, of course, then we go through these formal processes.
Yeah.
But everybody seems to be saying this is true, this happened. From my point of view, that MP should just be out of Parliament.
Yes.
You cannot be watching pornographic material in our Parliament.
Yeah.
It brings the entire institution into disrepute.
Absolutely.
And I would say that is misogynistic. Porn is misogynistic, and watching it in a public space where women are around, now that I would call out.
Yeah.
But that's where I say we don't need these official processes. If he's not denying it, he's out.
Yeah. And in terms of watching things in Parliament, I think a lot of people have been saying, why does everybody need their phones in Parliament if they're entering into a debate? Surely they should leave their phones outside of the chamber, because there's a lot of... I mean, we had an instance in Northern Ireland where an MLA was looking at new shoes, and he wanted to buy new shoes and what have you. It's obviously not what we're talking about today, but should we have phones in Parliament?
Gosh, I would love phones to be out of Parliament and out of meetings.
Yes.
So that's a broader issue. Look, Parliament is absolutely the seat of our democracy. The most important issues are debated and discussed there. So I can say as an outsider now, when you look in and you see there's nobody there, well, half the people are there are looking at their phones.
Yes.
So then we think, well, they're not taking it seriously. So, I would love that. Get the phones out. And
maybe they're not listening to the debate. They're just looking at their phones.
If you're in there, listen to the debate, and let's see more of them in there as well.
Yeah.
Gosh, we're in such a sort of dangerous world at the moment. We want to know that our parliamentarians are absolutely focusing on our issues and taking them seriously.
Well, Caroline, thank you for coming in this afternoon. It's been a fascinating discussion, and it's good to have been able to talk to you. Now, Labour have been calling on the government to introduce a windfall tax, a measure the government has been refusing to do. But in a hint of what possibly could be a new U-turn, Chancellor Rishi Sunak didn't rule it out. I'll be joined by the former Chief Executive of Energy UK, Angela Knight, to talk about this. But before that, let's take a look at the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a fine day out there for most of us, but there's a big difference in how it feels, depending on whether you've got the sunny spells or the stubborn cloud which has stuck around across parts of central southern and eastern England. That's coming in from the North Sea around an area of high pressure. The high at the moment centred over the UK. An area of low pressure is approaching for the bank holiday weekend, albeit a weak one, and it's approaching fairly slowly. So skies generally clearing through the evening, and overnight under those clear skies it will turn rather chilly in many spots. 1 or 2 fog patches might form, but also a few patches of frost, particularly for central and eastern parts of England, East Wales, temperatures dipping close to freezing in the countryside. Central and eastern Scotland also on the chilly side, but the north and west of Scotland, Northern Ireland, sees cloud and rain arrive during the morning, and as a result frost-free here, but a damp start to the weekend. And that rain progressing into eastern and southern Scotland by the afternoon, as well as perhaps Cumbria and parts of North Wales. Away from there, we keep the sunny spells, and it's a warmer day because of the change in wind direction, certainly for the east coast. We're up at 16, 17, perhaps even 18 Celsius. But a cooler day to come for the north of the UK because of those outbreaks of rain. Heavy at times over western hills and coasts. It sinks south during Saturday night, pushing into much of England and Wales away from the southeast. And it clears up across northern Scotland, just a few showers remaining here. But because of the extensive cloud by this stage, it's a milder start to Sunday compared to Saturday. But it's a grey and damp start for many, particularly much of England and Wales away from the southeast. We'll see those spells of rain continuing through Sunday. By bank holiday Monday, brighter skies arrive, but the rain turns more showery, so scattered showers for many. It will feel a little warmer, highs of 16 Celsius.
Since the first Gulf War, I've covered complex conflicts around the globe. For comprehensive coverage of the ongoing situation in Ukraine, join me, Alastair Stewart, every Saturday and Sunday from noon.
If you are the most authoritarian regime, at some point they will rise up.
Which will become more dangerous.
You cannot occupy a country of that size.
And that means World War III.
That means war. Putin did not expect that.
That's me, Alastair Stewart, from 12, Saturday and Sunday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel, and we're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Welcome back to the briefing. It's just gone 22 minutes past 3. Well, the government will call for big energy companies to invest more money on British gas and renewable projects. The opposition has been calling for a windfall tax, and the government thus far has refused to implement it. But Chancellor Rishi Sunak has threatened the big companies of imposing one if they fail to invest in helping the country produce more of its own energy. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the former Chief Executive of Energy UK, Angela Knight. Angela, very welcome to the programme this afternoon. I suppose the first question should be, what do you make of a windfall tax? Do you think it would work? Is it the right thing to do?
No, I don't actually think it's the right thing to do, because I think it does deter investment, not just early investment, but it also deter companies coming to the UK or deciding that they're going to commit money where we want it to be committed from energy companies, which is for the time being pulling more gas out of the North Sea, but a longer term is also investing in wind farms. And of course, some do both. And I think it's often forgotten that actually the taxation that is currently paid by those who are drilling and extracting is around, it's 40%. That is around twice what normal corporation tax is on other companies. So already they're paying some form of substantial additional taxation into the UK. The only trouble is about all this is that from an external perception,
Oh, goodness. Angela seems to have frozen there, which is very unfortunate, because I wanted to discuss with her if such a tax would indeed even bring in much money to the Exchequer, and how then would it go on to be used for citizens across the UK, because as I had understood it, increasing corporation tax even further on energy companies would only bring in another £1 billion. And when you put that right across the UK, it's actually not that much of a difference to the bills that people are going to have to pay. Well, I think Angela is back with us again. Great, Angela. So you were talking there about the amount of corporation tax that energy companies already pay.
I think right now what has happened is my signal has gone dicey, so I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you.
I'm sorry about that.
I can hear you.
Just don't know if anybody can hear me.
You obviously can't hear me. Angela, can you hear me? No.
Yes, it comes and goes, and I'm not sure
it comes
why.
and goes. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. But essentially, Rishi Sunak hasn't ruled out a windfall tax. However, he has said that it will only come in if companies don't invest. And of course, most of the companies do intend to invest in the infrastructure in the future. So we're now going to hopefully move on, and Rhiannon is at the news desk. So we're going to move on to the news. After that, we'll hear from Dominika, and she's going to come to us from Poland to tell us about all of the issues around Russia and gas. Thank you.
Thanks, Arlene. It's 3:25, your top stories from the GB newsroom. 2 British charity workers reportedly captured by the Russian military in Ukraine have been named as Paul Yuri and Dylan Healy. It's understood the volunteers were detained earlier this week at a checkpoint close to Zaporizhia in the south. The 2 men, both civilians, were working as part of a joint humanitarian project helping evacuation efforts. The UK sending experts to Ukraine to help investigate any potential Russian war crimes. The Foreign Secretary's announcement follows the death of a British military veteran in Ukraine this week. Liz Truss says a team of investigators will arrive in neighbouring Poland early next month with the aim of helping to prosecute Moscow.
We will be sending them out in the month of May. They'll be working closely with the Ukrainian authorities. This is about collecting a wide range of evidence, witness statements, forensic evidence, video evidence. We're also using British intelligence to help show the links between what is happening on the front line and the Russian authorities.
The Labour Party has now confirmed that its deputy leader was with Sir Keir Starmer at a gathering in Durham during lockdown. Previously, journalists had been told Angela Rayner wasn't at the event at which Sir Keir was filmed drinking beer. Now a source insists that was a mistake made in good faith. Tory MPs have asked police to reconsider their decision not to investigate the event. The man accused of murdering Katie Kenyon will stand trial on the 14th of November. Andrew Burfield appeared via video link at Preston Crown Court for a brief hearing this morning. Katie Kenyon vanished 7 days ago. She was last seen getting into a van in Burnley in Lancashire. Patients with arthritis will now be advised to lose weight and exercise to improve their quality of life. Government guidance issued to the NHS says overweight patients should be told their pain can be reduced if they shed the pounds. More than 10 million people in the UK have arthritis or similar conditions. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. It's back to Arlene and the briefing in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to the briefing this afternoon. It's just 3:30 in the afternoon, and I'm delighted to say that Angela Knight is back on the line again. We were trying to have that discussion about the windfall tax just before the news, but now I'm delighted Angela's back, and we're going to continue that discussion now. So the question I was asking Angela was really, how lucrative would a windfall tax be, even if we were to impose it on those big energy companies?
Well, I think not a lot. And of course, it's not on energy companies, actually, Arlene. It's just on those ones who do the oil drilling and the gas drilling. And as we already tax them at the rate of 40% anyway, an extra 2, 3, 4, 5 or even 10% is not actually going to bring in that much in the way of money that can be distributed to buffer people's energy bills, which is where the discussion lies. But what it will do is act as a very significant deterrent. And that's what concerns me, because we need these companies. And what's more, we need them to invest in getting more gas out of the North Sea for the time being, whilst we transition over to a more greener and cleaner economy.
And you've mentioned transition, and that's something we talk a lot about on GB News, because some other mainstream broadcasters think that you can just switch off the oil and gas and move immediately to renewables. We know that that's not the case. I mean, how long do you think that transition will be, Angela?
Thinking about the actual investment that is needed and a reasonable timescale, we will, first of all, need to build up our backup, which the green backup is nuclear. I know, put like that, that might sound a slightly strange equation, but and that doesn't mean that you don't carry on building offshore wind, but wind doesn't blow all the time. And so making sure that we have continuous power is very important. And so we've got to build that backup. Now, if we start on building the small nuclear power stations that we need to add to the one that's nearly finished at Hinkley and the one that's been announced at Sizewell, we're looking at, 10, 15 years before we really get to the backup that we need. And I might have been rather optimistic there. So 15 years is a fair period of time. And that for that period of time, we're going to have to carry on extracting gas to do the backup for our electricity generation, as well as gas for central heating. And thinking about that and how we deal with that is a complex situation. And it's certainly not one of these things where you just say, do this and you can switch that off.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes the whole discussion about our energy security and the cost of energy has been very simplified, and actually it's something that I feel quite strongly about. But just to finish then, Angela, the new energy strategy that came out from the government rightly talks about increasing offshore wind, but it also talks about hydrogen and nuclear. Would you have liked to have seen fracking in there as well, in other words, shale gas extraction?
Quietly, what is happening with fracking, shale gas extraction, is there's a review taking place, and where I think they need to go on that is let's do a trial. Let's do a proper trial in which we've got the environmentalists there, we've got the scientists there, we've parked the emotion, and we're just getting to the facts. The hydrogen point is a good one, though, because the proposition with hydrogen is to use surplus energy when you've got it in the middle of the night. And you use that for electrolysis of water to give us hydrogen, and the first place we can use that is in the chemical industry. So there's a lot of things that you can put around the edge. All have got to be done. We've still got to have the central question of getting alternative, secure energy supply, of which one has to be something, I keep on going back to nuclear, which gives us that secure electricity for our industries and our homes.
Well, Angela, thank you so much for sticking with us, because I think it is important that we have that discussion. So now, in some breaking news, we're going to go across to Rhiannon.
Thanks, Arlene. Yes, some news just in. MP Neil Parish has had the Conservative whip suspended as an investigation is launched for reportedly watching porn in the Commons chamber. That's according to a spokeswoman for the Conservative chief whip. We'll bring you more on that as we get it. But it's back to you, Arlene, for now.
Thank you, Rhiannon. That's something we were talking about at the top of the show. Of course, we didn't know the identity of that MP at that time, but now that has been confirmed in that breaking news. But to move on then, this week Poland has had to seek new sources for oil and gas after a Russian energy giant cut off the country's gas supply for refusing to pay in rubles. The move comes as tensions between Russia and the European Union escalate further, with many saying the development is an attempt by Russia to exert economic pressure on Europe. Polish officials have given assurances that the nation is able to cope without the imports from Russia, and said that Poland had been planning for the possibility for some time. But what does Russia's decision to cut off energy supply mean for Poland, Europe and indeed the world? And is this move an attempt to blackmail trading partners into succumbing to Russian demands? Well, joining me now live from Brussels to discuss this further is a Polish journalist from TVP Television, Dominika Kozik. Dominika, thank you for joining me. I said there in my opening remarks that Poland was preparing for this. Is that a fair thing to say, that you are prepared for what has happened with that Russian oil and gas?
Hello, many thanks for having me in your show. I think that it's quite correct. Of course, it is not 100% because there are some municipalities in Poland which has now problem with energy security because they had contracts with Russian companies. But Poland was thinking about this option since many, many years. I remember when I came to Brussels to start to work here as a correspondent in 2005, it was already an issue. It was Poland who raised this issue on the level of the European Union ministers. Next year, we had first quite important energy crisis when in 2006, Russia decided during the very strong winter to cut off gas supply to certain member countries like Bulgaria and Austria. And then Poland told that energy security is one of the biggest issues for the European Union, and we should prepare for this option because Russia will use this to blackmail European countries. Russia is always behaving the same since many years, since many centuries, and that's why Polish current government, which is in the power since 2015, was preparing for this. For example, by building a new project like a gas terminal in Świnoujście and looking for some other partners from which Poland can buy energy sources like, for example, LNG terminal, gas terminal, and we have thanks of this gas from America. So Poland is prepared because we have enough sources of energy. We can even share this with some smaller countries like Moldova, which is not a member of the EU, but now is completely depending on Russia. So just in case Poland will might offer her help to countries in neighborhood. And the most important was to prepare for this also on the political level. And I think that Poland is pretty well prepared, much better than some other even bigger and even more powerful countries in EU.
Indeed, and one of those, of course, is Germany. And we know that Germany is quite reliant on Russian gas supplies. And I think that will be a concern. But it appears that the Polish government, as you have rightly indicated, have been thinking about this and planning for this for some time and have been, it turns out, very wise in relation to this. I suppose the question is, what else can the rest of Europe, including Germany, do now? Because this is a huge problem when their huge neighbour decides to use their almost monopoly-like status to blackmail, and we've used that term, people in their neighbouring countries.
Yes, the biggest problem now will be with the Germany, which is the biggest European economy, the biggest country. And unfortunately, it was Germany who played a very negative role in our European increasing dependence on Russian sources, because it was Germany who decided to build two biggest projects with Russia, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2. It was against the will of Poland, some Scandinavian countries, Baltic states who told that it will allow Russia to dictate conditions to the EU. But unfortunately, German government during Chancellor Schroeder and later on Angela Merkel decided to continue this building this project, and now thanks of this, so-called thanks of this, Germans are really depending on Russia, and a part of this, Germans are still paying lots of money to Russia, and thanks of this money, Russia is able to fight with Ukraine, has enough power, and it was another big mistake of Germany during recent days, because Germany, but also Hungary and Austria decided that they are able to pay in rubles to Russia for gas. It was against the decision of all EU countries. So it's quite ridiculous when I hear some critical voices from or I heard from German or from some other our Western colleagues that in Poland there is no rule of law, there is no democracy, that Poland is not a liberal democracy, but from this, in the same time, those countries are dealing with a completely non-democratic country like Russia, and they are doing business and still pretend to do business like usual with Russia. So it is hypocrisy, but it is also, what is more important, very negative for all EU. I hope that now Germany will change decision, especially that they see how destructive, how negative was recent German policy towards Russia, also energy policy, and now Germany will have to decide, will Germany be a loyal member of the European Union and will not pay to Russia in rubles, or and will agree for a sanction against Russia or not. I hope that the Germany finally will change a decision and will also agree for the sanction on Russia, also including energy sources like gas and oil.
And Dominica, thank you for joining me this afternoon, because certainly it appears that Germany has put a lot of eggs in the one basket, and I was very interested to learn that Poland had a lot of storage capacity and they were using that storage capacity to give them security as well. So that's very interesting from our perspective here in the UK. So thank you for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you very much
on those. Yes, thank you. More now on those claims that Neil Parish was the Tory MP who watched porn in the Commons. Let's go to Tom Harwood.
Yes, the most extraordinary revelation now. Not many people were expecting a name to appear this quickly. Perhaps this would be something that would appear in the Sunday papers, was a wide expectation. A number of different names have been floating around Westminster for the last few days, since news of this really started to emerge on Tuesday evening. Of course, it was raised then at Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, back when people thought that it may be a front bencher who had made this transgression within the chamber. Then the Prime Minister said that if it indeed had taken place, that would be a breach of the ministerial code, that would be grounds for sacking from the government. It has since transpired that there was confusion with regard to that, not a front bencher, not a minister, not even a PPS. No, although a relatively senior parliamentarian, of course, Neil Parish was the chairman of, or is, I should say, the chairman of the Food, Environment and Rural Affairs Committee, DEFRA. Now, this is someone who has been in Parliament since 2010, and before then, for 10 years, was a member of the European Parliament from 1999 right the way to 2009, when he took over his seat in the southwest with a pretty stonking majority. This is someone who holds a relatively safe seat down there in the southwest, and hasn't really made much of a national profile for himself in his over a decade sitting on those green benches. But clearly a very disturbing development, and indeed the Conservative Party have been quick to say that the whip has been suspended from Neil Parish while this investigation goes on.
Tom, thank you so much. Certainly Neil Parish is well known to farmers, I think it's fair to say, right across the UK because of his work in DEFRA. And do you think that they decided to come out with this story because they wanted to kill the fact that it had been reported that this was a cabinet minister and a front bencher that was involved in this story?
I think that what has transpired today, the brilliant journalism of the Daily Telegraph that has revealed this this afternoon, is not of the timing that the government would have liked. If anything, the government would not want us to be talking about this so close to the local elections. Now, it did seem that there was a lot of confusion. First, there was confusion as to whether this was more than one member of Parliament, because two separate female Conservative MPs had said they'd seen someone doing this. Now, it later transpired that those two female Conservative MPs who spoke at the same meeting on Tuesday night, a meeting incidentally that was convened to try and keep women in Westminster. Conservative politicians had gathered in a committee room in Parliament to try and find ways to get the atmosphere to be better in Parliament, to retain female MPs in Westminster for longer, because the attrition rate, the rate at which female MPs tend to leave Westminster is a lot higher than the rate at which male MPs tend to leave Westminster of their own accord. And this meeting turned into a session whereby people mentioned the problems of the culture in Parliament, and then these two female MPs mentioning this specific transgression. Now, it transpired then later that this was the same individual, but still confusion over whether this person was a minister or otherwise. Now we know for certain it wasn't a minister, but as I say, a reasonably senior backbencher, someone who has survived now 4 general elections to the House of Commons.
OK, Tom, thank you for that update. You mentioned local elections happening next week here on the mainland. In the run-up to the elections in Northern Ireland, we've been covering some of the seats, looking at areas where seats may change. And our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, has been in North Belfast, which is a constituency that is almost divided equally between unionism and nationalism. Let's take a look at what's happening on the ground in Northern Ireland.
North Belfast is a true mix of Northern Ireland's population. It has all shades of society and has had its fair share of problems. It has a population of just over 105,000. The outgoing MLAs consisted of 2 DUP, 2 Sinn Féin and 1 SDLP. 21% of the population are under 16 years of age and 16% over 64. Welfare claims and crime are also above average. The voter turnout is usually high. North Belfast is not only divided by unionism and nationalism, but the gaps socially and economically are vast. Such is the divisions in this area that peace walls designed to separate communities are still in use. Just 2 miles away, and tree-lined avenues and luxury cars lie in the shadow of Belfast Castle. At one of its shopping centres, voters have different ideas of what they expect from government.
The cost of living?
Probably the crisis at the minute with, heating and eating and the people are facing, really.
I suppose money, going to different schools, integrated schools, which I am all for, but I think it's unfair, that they're getting more money.
The last seat in this area will be hotly contested, and once again it will all go down to transfers and managing your vote. Dougie Beattie, GB News, North Belfast.
Well, that was Dougie Beattie reporting from North Belfast, or as it's known in Westminster, Belfast North, which of course is one of the constituencies in Northern Ireland where we're having the Assembly election next Thursday. We're going to go back now to Tom Harwood, our very own Tom Harwood, to continue that discussion that we were having before we had that little package from Dougie. And of course, Tom, we do have these elections right across the UK next week. We have the local council elections in different parts of England, Scotland and Wales, and we have that huge election in Northern Ireland, the Northern Ireland Assembly election.
We certainly do. Now, it's hard to know how much an event like this will play into voters' minds when it comes to actually going to those polling stations on Thursday. Of course, in England, in Scotland and in Wales, these are votes about local issues, about council tax, about bin collections. To what extent will the culture of Westminster affect those votes? Well, judging by historic precedents, it does seem like there will be a great degree of that sort of thinking behind how people vote. People tend to want to send a message to Westminster politicians, even if it's not a Westminster election. But of course, when we're talking about this issue, this is just the last in a long litany of scandals enveloping politicians within Westminster. Of course, we've heard multiple stories, one of a Labour MP being found to have bullied staff, one of a Conservative MP who drove away from a car collision, and indeed multiple stories about Conservative MPs briefing newspapers about the deputy leader of the Labour Party trying to distract the Prime Minister during Prime Minister's questions. And added to this, of course, Keir Starmer's lockdown beers, Boris Johnson's lockdown birthday cake. This has not been a particularly edifying week for politicians of all stripes.
Indeed, it hasn't been, and it says something about our politics at the moment when we are talking about what the politicians are doing as opposed to the delivery for the people that put them there. Is it not the case?
That's certainly the case, and ultimately people will have a right to feel aggrieved that sometimes these Westminster conversations become so introspective. These conversations tend to have in the last few months become politicians talking to politicians about politicians. And the public has a right to feel aggrieved and indeed angry about that, because that ultimately is to the detriment of those wider issues. It's the enormous cost of living crisis that the whole Western world is facing now. We've seen that just today the Eurozone has announced the highest inflation that the Euro has ever had. Similarly, inflation high in this country, high in America.
So Tom,
and indeed war in Europe.
Yeah, unfortunately, Tom, we're having a few problems with your line. You and I could talk about local elections and elections in Northern Ireland all afternoon, but I do understand that we're getting some news now from Southwark Crown Court in the near future. So we're going to come to that in a little while. But we're now going to look at the Earl and Countess of Wessex, and they've returned from their tour of the Caribbean. And like the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge last month, the royal couple were there to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee. But protests overshadowed parts of the visit. And our royal reporter, Cameron Walker, looks back on their time in the region.
If ever there was an omen warning of the hostile welcome, perhaps that was it. The Earl and Countess of Wessex toured the Caribbean this week to celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee and try to shore up support for the monarchy. But before the tour started, the Grenada leg was postponed. No reason was given. Following Barbados' decision to remove the Queen as head of state in favour of a republic, there's been growing calls for Britain to pay damages for its role in the slave trade. Ernesto Cook, a journalist at the St Vincent Times, suggests the royals should take more of an interest.
Engage the common man and find out more about what's making them want to pull away from the republic. That would be a good thing for them, I can tell you that.
Edward and Sophie got stuck in, embracing Caribbean culture, food and music.
Take me home to paradise, I wanna go home.
The couple also highlighted important charity work. Sophie is a global ambassador for a blind prevention organisation and met local representatives in St Vincent. But huge welcoming crowds were accompanied by protests. One sign called on the Queen to apologise for slavery. But the numbers attending were tiny compared to the country's population. Prince Edward was perhaps put in an uncomfortable position when the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda urged him to use his diplomatic influence over reparations. One theme remained strong though, the love and respect for Her Majesty the Queen, this year marking 70 years on the throne. It's unlikely another Caribbean country will become a republic anytime soon. But Kadeem Joseph, an Antiguan journalist, thinks Queen Elizabeth herself is the reason there's still support for the monarchy.
A lot of us see her as that figurehead. And when she passes on, and I hope that's no time soon, but if that were to happen, I think it would be easier for countries like mine to let go of the monarchy.
There's no doubt there's lots of fans of the monarchy in the Caribbean. Palace officials will be watching the reaction closely and perhaps reimagining how to approach tours to developing Commonwealth nations in the future. Cameron Walker, GB News.
Well, it's been a day of breaking news, and we're now going to go across to our reporter Ellie Costello, who's outside of Southwark Crown Court. Ellie? Ellie, can you bring us up to date with what has happened there today? Oh, that's unfortunate. OK, well, I'm afraid that's all from me today then. It no doubt will be on the news at 4, what has happened at Southwark Crown Court. But this has been the briefing, and I look forward to being with you next week, probably from Northern Ireland, because we have the Assembly elections there next week. So look forward to seeing you then. After the weather and the news, you'll be having Nana. So it's good to be with you, and I'll see you next week.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. It's a fine day out there for most of us, but there's a big difference in how it feels, depending on whether you've got the sunny spells or the stubborn cloud which has stuck around across parts of central, southern and eastern England. That's coming in from the North Sea around an area of high pressure. The high at the moment centred over the UK, an area of low pressure is approaching for the bank holiday week, albeit a weak one. And it's approaching fairly slowly. So skies generally clearing through the evening, and overnight under those clear skies, it will turn rather chilly in many spots. 1 or 2 fog patches might form, but also a few patches of frost, particularly for central and eastern parts of England, East Wales, dipping in the countryside. Central and eastern Scotland also on the chilly side, but the north and west of Scotland, Northern Ireland, sees cloud and rain arrive during the morning, and as a result frost-free here, but a damp start to the weekend. And that rain progressing into eastern and southern Scotland by the afternoon, as well as perhaps Cumbria and parts of North Wales. Away from there, we get the sunny spells, and it's a warmer day because of the change in wind direction, certainly for the east coast. We're up at 16, 17, perhaps even 18 Celsius. But a cooler day to come for the north of the UK because of those outbreaks of rain. Heavy at times over western hills and coasts. It sinks south during Saturday night, pushing into much of England and Wales away from the southeast. And it clears up across northern Scotland, just a few showers remaining here. But because of the extensive cloud by this stage, it's a milder start to Sunday compared to Saturday. But it's a grey and damp start for many, particularly much of England and Wales away from the southeast. We'll see those spells of rain continuing through Sunday. By Bank Holiday Monday, brighter skies arrive, but the rain turns more showery, so scattered showers for many. It will feel a little warmer, highs of 16 Celsius.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question. Don't miss it, Monday to Thursday.